Hi, I'm Angelina Wang, and today I'm going to talk about our work, Revise, a tool for measuring and mitigating biases in image datasets, work with Arvind Narayanan and Olga Rusikovsky at Princeton. Dataset bias is a big problem in machine learning, where models will pick up on the biases present in the training data and perpetuate or even amplify them at test time. The result of this can include things like models being unable to recognize common objects in countries with a lower household income because those objects are not represented enough in the training dataset. For example, De Vries et al. Showed that household items like soap and spices are classified incorrectly when represented in countries that are not as highly represented in the dataset. Another domain in which dataset bias leads to serious consequences is in facial recognition algorithms, which Wollomwini and Jebru showed to perform much more poorly on darker-skinned females. In this work, we build a tool that works to reveal the biases in a visual dataset early in the machine learning pipeline, before any models are trained. It takes in as input a visual dataset and its annotations, and outputs metrics, seeking to produce insights and possible actions. We aim to go beyond simply documenting underrepresentations, but looking more deeply into how the portrayals of the image differ along various axes. This means that beyond just counting the number of occurrences of various objects and people with objects, we perform many other automated analyses that take advantage of the rich visual images in the dataset. Due to the automated nature of our tool, we are able to surface discovered patterns on large-scale datasets at a level at which human inspection would be impractical. The tool is intended to help dataset users diagnose what kinds of biases the datasets they are training their model on may contain, because these same biases may propagate into the model. This is meant to be used alongside other dataset diagnostic work, such as datasheets for datasets. Our tool is also intended to help dataset creators themselves, who can iteratively query the tool to find biases that may be present in their dataset and adjust their data collection or labeling process accordingly. Suggestions of how to counteract discovered biases are recommended, but ultimately it is up to the dataset creator to ascertain which biases are problematic, such as those that reinforce societal stereotypes, and which biases are more harmless. Our tool is available as a collection of interactive Jupyter notebooks that allow customization. Users simply need to supply their dataset, which includes images and annotations. Our tool then uses a combination of pre-trained models to gather additional annotations, as well as fits new models to the dataset in order to discover patterns that arise. The analysis is done along 3 dimensions, looking at object classes, people of different genders, and different geographic locations. For the sake of time, in this talk we will just look into the kinds of patterns that can be discovered along one such dimension, gender. The insights we present are extracted from the COCO and Open Images datasets. We note that for this analysis we use the terms female and male to refer to a binarized socially perceived gender label and not gender identity nor sex assigned at birth, neither of which can be inferred from an image. We use these labels because of the annotations available to us from the datasets, and the annotations are derived from both datasets using the same method employed by Zhao et al., where if a caption or annotation contains a gendered person noun, such as woman or boy, and no gendered person noun of a different gender, then the image is labeled as containing a person who is female or male. One metric that our tool looks at is the contextual representation of what kinds of objects males and females are featured with and what kinds of scenes they are represented in. The object categories are derived from the annotations provided with the dataset. The scenes are derived from what a pre-trained scene classifier assigns to each image, which we acknowledge will bring the biases of this model itself. In this graph, we can see the object categories ranked by those which are more represented with males and those which are more represented with females. As we can see, the trends of these objects often mirror that of societal stereotypes, which can be problematic if we do not want the models trained on these datasets to perpetuate or even amplify such biases. In this graph, we see the same thing for scene categories. And once again, we see the same troubling trends. One possible action to take at the dataset level in response to the discovery of these patterns could include collecting more images of each gender with their underrepresented objects and in their underrepresented scenes to create a more evenly distributed dataset in this regard. The next thing we will look at is the interaction between objects and people of different genders. Through this kind of an analysis, we hope to get a deeper understanding for the kinds of differences in how various genders are portrayed that may not be immediately clear from just things like co-occurrence counts. We used a derived metric of 3D distance as a proxy for interaction. The distance metric is approximated using the distance in the image and size of the bounding boxes, and validation of this as a metric is provided in our paper. Proxy metrics like this allow us to perform large-scale automated analyses on the datasets. With such metrics in hand, we can see that for this particular example of the organ instrument, when people who are female are pictured with it, they are oftentimes merely near the instrument in some way, whereas when people who are male are pictured with the instrument, they are featured actually playing it. These more subtle differences in how gender is portrayed are not captured in more basic statistics, such as counting the co-occurrences of people of particular genders with objects. The action that can be taken with this discovery is making sure that people of different genders are represented in comparable ways with the different objects. Beyond looking at how people of different genders interact differently with the same genre of objects, we can take advantage of the rich visual data we have and investigate how the same object is visually portrayed differently across genders. By fitting a model to separate images with the same object across the two genders, and then looking at what the model has most confidently classified as male and female, we can discover additional biases in the dataset. We can look to two examples from the Open Images dataset of the images that contain a sports uniform and images that contain a flower. We can see that images of sports uniforms with people who are female tend to feature indoor sports or people in swimsuits. On the other hand, images of sports uniforms with people who are male tend to feature baseball, an area in which there is very low female visual representation in this dataset. For flower, we can again see that females and males are represented very differently with these objects, whereas we would hope that every object was represented similarly between the genders, so as not to continue to perpetuate any societal biases. An action that could be taken to alleviate such disparities would be to collect more images of each gender with a particular object in more diverse situations. The last thing I'm going to talk about is a little different, in that now we are identifying a pattern in the annotations rather than the images. One thing you might notice in these images is that the caption, which is where the gender labels come from, mention a man in all of these images. However, upon visual inspection, it is not clear how this gender could be identified. Through further analysis, we discover the trend of gender annotations to default to male in situations where gender is clearly not discriminable in an image. This is not to say that there are situations where gender is or is not discriminable, but just that these are situations where gender should definitely not be able to be inferred. We define two such situations, which is where the number of pixels that make up the person is below a particular threshold, or when no face is detected in the image. Gender labels assigned in these kinds of situations should be pruned from the dataset as they are not an accurate characterization of the image. In conclusion, we built a tool called Revise, which is a tool that automates the process of discovering biases in a visual dataset, as well as presents possible actionable insights on what to do. The tool automatically discovers anomalous patterns in the dataset and surfaces these to the user. However, it is ultimately up to the user to decide what to do about these, because societal context is required to determine if a bias is actually problematic or not, and what kinds of actions should be taken to mitigate them. We hope the tool will help suggest actionable insights to constructively engage with these datasets. In this talk, we only looked at gender-based biases, but our tool also provides insights on object-based and geography-based biases. With regards to looking at the dataset, we hope to be able to better examine and understand the data, so that we have an idea of what kinds of biases our models have the potential of picking up on. However, it is important to note that dataset bias is only one part of the problem. The perfect, unbiased dataset does not exist, so it will require many other debiasing efforts, including work on the algorithmic side. We hope that you will download our tool. Thank you.